Welcome back. Welcome back to the Detroit is Different podcast studios. And in studio, I have somebody that is definitely connected. So connected that we running it back. When I say running it back, we did an intro and it was like so much in the ethos of what I call artistic alchemy. That's what she creates. So I know you're thinking like, what is that? You thinking it's the hip hop producer? That is part of it. You're thinking it's the book. The concept is you can turn something into gold. So the culture, the arts, and how this all comes together. As people usually come up to me and say, all right, so what do you do and how do you do it? And when I was younger, I guess I had more of a through line to directly say, this is what I do. Now I'm one of those people that could be very confusing, right? And I actually do a lot of this stuff. And part of the premise in seeing a lot of this is the lady I have in the studio now. She was doing a lot of this stuff. And it's others too. But she was one of the first to take spoken word and get into corporate spaces, nonprofit spaces, even like big celebrations, like, like 100th year birthday, 50th anniversary, things like that. Things where you just usually don't think that you're going to see a performer that you're just so used to seeing in a setting of like a bar or maybe like a summer festival. You would see her there, right? And it's like, how did this fit? And guess what? It does fit, right? Detroit is different and very creative. And in that, the mix of so many styles, so many flair, but words are something that hit powerfully with her. So with that, Ber-Henda Williams, how are you?
I'm doing well, Kari. How are you?
Definitely. I'm good. We running it back, but we keeping it going.
That's it.
All right. So you, along a list of so many others, are the should have been on here. Like when I say that, people think I'm probably like joking or something. It's a lot of people, right? And it's like, damn, I ain't had them on. And it's like, yep, it's time to go on and check that list. So thank you so much for accepting the offer and being in effect.
Absolutely.
So with that,
yeah,
we're going to start this whole thing as I gave a little bit of the sauce earlier. So you may have, if you're from Detroit, you have not been in an experience connected to Ber-Henda being there. I mean, I'm going to say, I don't know what rock you under. Like, it's kind of like it's a couple different places and spaces. You should have experienced some things. You know what I mean? You should have seen Black women rock. You should have seen, rest in peace, Amp Flintler live. You should have seen Mama Soul, even though she's from Flint. You know what I'm saying? It's like a couple things that it's like, you should kind of know that. You know what I'm saying? You're a part of that.
Thank you.
So definitely I want to know more of the Detroit story. So the roots, like first, second, third generation, what's the roots to the day?
Wow. So, I love going through the city, especially driving down the lodge, because there's just so many memories. It's like you can point here and you can point there. And it's like, oh, when you get off at the Chicago exit. So for me, when I get off the Chicago exit from the lodge, it takes me down memory lane of going to St. Matthew, St. Joseph's Episcopal Church. So, we can't talk about Detroit history and revolution and civil rights without talking about Mattie Joe's. That's the church that I was actually baptized in.
Wow.
Right. But my mother grew up in the historic Boston Edison district. Right. My dad, Southwest.
Okay.
So, right. So we know tale of 2-3 different cities all in one city.
Yep.
Right. And the commonality was, I will tell them, I'm a proud assembly line baby. Generous Motors, where my parents met.
Okay. All right. So I definitely got to go. Were they here already? Did they come up from someplace
They came
else?
up. Yep.
Whereabouts?
So mom, by way of North Carolina, my grandmother, and grandfather, Alabama. They met in New York before they came over to Detroit.
I was going to say that because the migration patterns of North Carolina usually take people to New York.
And that's where they met. So she went to, after she graduated from then Hampton Institute, now known as Hampton University, meet my grandfather in New York. He has a sister there. And you would think, like you're talking about migration patterns, he was rushed out of Alabama.
Like many.
Rushed out. He was walking down the street and he wouldn't divert his path from a white man.
I want you to expand on that, because when people hear stories like that, and oftentimes I believe we reflect on like how things would be, and people say, well, I would have did this and I would have did that, and you don't necessarily know the context of how you would respond, because so much of society was set in this way. Hence the murder of Emmett Till was so shocking, because he was from, quote unquote, the North, coming down south.
And so, yeah, for context, you may say something like, well, that wouldn't be me, and you have to understand, it's sundown town. So even if the retaliation wasn't against my grandfather per se, he still had family there. And that could have been very dangerous for them too. So if I can't get Junior, I'm going to get somebody. So he was rushed out before the sun set to live with his sister in New York, because, as I was saying, he wouldn't divert his path from a white man. And a white man said to him, "Get out of my way, boy." His response was, "I'm not a boy, I'm a man." Again, we may not think that is consequential now, but we're talking about a sundown. We're talking about in the midst of bloody summers. We're talking about the height of lynching is when this happened. So rushes out, lives with his sister. My grandmother's getting off work. She's a nurse. And there's just this chance encounter. Yeah. Meet, fall in love, and eventually move to Detroit.
All right. I want you to unpack a little bit of, we hear that term, and I can give some context to it, but I want to hear your definition. What is a sundown town?
Well, that means your black ass better be in the house before the sun goes down, or else lynching, maiming, forfeiting, any kind of egregious action can be taken against you if you are not quote unquote in your proper place.
And I love you uplift that, and like that's your father, because sometimes the way it's framed and the black and white images or film, people think that was like centuries ago. It was like, nah, it's people that knew straight up. And I would argue it's still some sundown town ish scenarios that go on. As when I interviewed the archives, go back in time to the incident where Dre Sconey had a shotgun pulled on him in Texas. And it can get real. It can get very real just because of race and so many misunderstandings and the ignorance of others that manifest into hatred. And that hatred can move into violence.
I mean, Alabama just recently, we heard about the 16-year-old young man, they have down there where they've instituted. You don't have to knock to do a raid.
No knock raids.
No knock. 16 years old. Alabama. And when I saw I said, Alabama.
Yeah.
Here we go, Alabama.
And so many black folks are from Alabama that make their way to Detroit. Rest in peace, Coleman Young. Same story. Had to get out of Alabama and flee, like so many families, and like you uplift, because it's not like you can flee and just one person go, and then also fleeing is not the same. You don't have the amenities of like Airbnb or Uber or Google Maps and everything. Sometimes you show up at a place and it's like, who are you?
That's right.
With a letter from somebody saying you a cousin.
That's right. That's right. And like I said, with my grandfather having a sister in New York, they had to think fast. What are the pathways? And if we are being honest, it's not like you can get on the main highways to travel in many cases. So you're literally moving through the backwoods, and you're moving through and moving quickly to safety. And like I said, even if they didn't get him, it's still a very real possibility. He uprooted from his mother, his father, other relatives, cousins. He's a twin. My grandfather was a twin.
Wow.
Right. Wow. 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 And we hear all the time twins have that telepathic
energy,
right, and connection. So he had to leave that.
Yeah. So New York, whereabouts in New York?
New York, They were in, I want to say not the Bronx, Harlem.
There you go. I'd assume. So they moved to, like, they already got a taste of, and I know my people from Harlem would say, they got a taste of blackness in Harlem and then come for more blackness in Detroit.
That's right. Come on, Chocolate City.
What led them to the D?
All of the things that were heard back then. Opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Auto industry.
Yep.
So, you hear that you have the big three in these, houses that Black folks are allowed to have. And I really want to also center too. Now, don't get me wrong. The North does have its own version of discrimination and segregation. It is here. But again, you're talking about moving from a sundown town to places where you can get in with the big three. And like I said, I'm a proud assembly line baby. You can get double time, triple time, quadruple time, and live a really great life.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandparents got their home, unfortunately, due to redlining. It wouldn't sell
Mm-hmm.
to Black folks. So my mother was actually born on Ferry Street in a tenant house. Now, if we're talking about where Ferry is, why couldn't she get to Henry Ford Hospital? That's like a stone's throw.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking 1945.
Wow. So with that, just knowing the richness of that story and kind of knowing that neighborhood, that I guess is the community, because that's always the next question, where you're cutting your teeth, I'm guessing. So that community, was that home kept in the family? Was that the neighborhood?
Sadly,
what was
no.
the connection?
I really wish we had held on to that house. So, like I said, assembly line baby. My parents married, left my grandmother's home. So they multi-generational living. So they stacked their money
Mm-hmm.
and moved in when they got married into my maternal grandparents' home on Atkinson. So that they could, have a great life, and then move to Ridge, which is near the old Redford area.
Okay, so Atkinson is in that Boston Edison footprint,
right.
for people that know.
Mm-hmm.
And so much culture over there that
Man.
does exist.
Come on.
Do you remember that neighborhood as being young?
Fondly. I had my own room there.
Okay. Okay. Having your own room when you're a kid is like
it's like
the
a
life.
big, it's the life. And when you're the firstborn grandchild, I felt like Simba.
Hilarious.
In the Lion King. It was
you got a lot of the what others didn't get.
Yeah.
They was pouring in.
It was literally a competition between my great aunt who lived on. So she was from North Carolina. My grandmother and great aunt, they were actually niece and aunt relationship, but there was just a bit of a distance. Now my grandmother never knew her mother, but which would have been my great aunt's sister. But she was raised, loved. However, picked tobacco.
North Carolina.
Yeah. I'm talking about the bag is bigger than her, and she's out there picking tobacco. So when my great aunt saw like kind of how my grandmother was living in Detroit, she was like, well, let me figure out how to get my way out of here. So she was working at the post office. So she got a transfer, moved to Lawrence, right off of Hamilton.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's still right there.
That's still exactly. Yep, still right there. Look, had a room there too.
There you go. There you go.
I did have to share a bed with my sister, but that's a whole other story. But no, I did have a room there. But what I find is the blessing is that I learned valuable lessons. Like I learned how to can. I learned how to pick collard greens and wash them in the bathtub.
Okay.
Snap green beans on the sun porch. Yeah. Drinking out of mason jars. Things like that. Going down in the basement. I watched them. This is old school, and maybe some of your audience members will appreciate this. Making sure that the feathers were burned off the chicken before you fried it. So they would hold it up and take a lighter. That was the worst smell in the world. But just to make sure that all the feathers were off the bird before you prepared the meal.
Between that and I guess some collard greens going, I love some greens. Y'all know we do the collard green cook-off, but I'm going to be serious. The smell of the start of collard greens is definitely something that,
leaves a lot to be desired.
Yes. I don't know if I could own a soul food restaurant.
Yeah, but using it in the bathtub, making sure you get all that grit and grime. Out of the collard greens.
Now it's so funny because that's where like it's always been like the running joke of like, you cleaning your greens in the tub, that so many people know. And then I guess this past presidential election, people was like, who does that? And it's like, people do that.
People do that.
Yeah, definitely. Especially like depending upon how large of a batch and everything. And so many of these traditions are carried on and done so different than what you would think, depending upon like just culture,
Culture. It's bonding.
Mm-hmm.
It's connection. It's family. I mean, there's all kind of conversations that come up in process. I learned how to press hair, in the kitchen.
Yeah, the kitchen is it's definitely one of them spaces and places. If you got like my grandma's room we in now was for sure Selma, Alabama. So certain things, it would be a different domain, and the way things would be looked at, like cornbread from scratch is different than Jiffy.
That's
right. Nothing's wrong with Jiffy.
Nothing's wrong with Jiffy.
But it's from scratch, and the kneading of the dough and all of that stuff. Like it's a whole process that kind of goes into certain things. And then you get some of these OGs where they're just like, this is what I do, how I do things that whole way. And you're just not going to get them to, transition is the ongoing, it's almost maybe like a 15-20 year debate over like I say, quick grits. You can't tell the difference, and it's like these people that just complain to me and say yes they can. No you can't. Okay, so enough with those discussions. And more to this relationship with a lot of elders, even at a younger age, where some of them retired. Like, what was the time like with the OGs for you?
So they retired, but they never quit. So my grandmother retired from nursing. So Herman Kiefer also holds a very special place in family. In family history.
So like she really was all in that same footprint in that neighborhood. Okay.
Yeah, she walked everywhere. She walked most places. And with the Herman Kiefer story, she worked with those who were detoxing from substance abuse. And she, during the rebellion or riot, depending on what you call it, in that neighborhood, she was helping her neighbors get to safety because they had a gate. So she had people in Herman Kiefer when the armored tanks and everything, because all of that was going down in the neighborhood.
So as you talk about detoxing, and I want to open that up a little bit. But before there, I definitely want to touch on as same thing with my grandmother. As she was retired, it's just such a different relationship I had with my grandmother than a lot of my other cousins, because they had the working grandma, which working grandma is cool too. But when you get, which is definitely a lift for parents, like when you have those days with your grandparent, like all day, that child care, it's just different. You listening to Mahalia Jackson, you take on like this, you're like in transported. Man,
you are really taking me back. Yeah, because so my grandmother wasn't one of those Bible thumpy
one of those grandmothers.
She wasn't one of those grandmothers.
But then you listening to blues, or like you're in an arc of like
Ella Fitzgerald, because she in New York, a lot of those jazz singers,
in Harlem,
she would be down the hall from Ella Fitzgerald or Sarah Vaughan. So all of those people, because I mean, again, we're still talking about segregation, so there's still very much black spaces, and so whether you're a celebrity or not, here's the thing: you still black,
and that's where you're gonna be. So with that, some of those expressions, you know what I'm saying? Like, you ever see like a 5-year-old saying "honey child," it's like, that's a grandparent getting watch a kid.
That's right. So my mother used to call them the Geritol set because it was
hilarious.
It was a clique of them.
Hilarious.
So during the summer, Even though my grandmother, like I said, was retired but didn't quit,
Mm-hmm.
she would still go over just across the way to Hamtramck. There was like a little factory there. She would work midnights,
Hmm.
even though she was retired.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember her having to be quiet during the day.
Mm.
And for those who know, when they're taking that nap so they can work midnights, you better be quiet, during the day so they can get that nap out before they go to work. And again, I think that also informs like my own work ethic because you can be retired, but that doesn't mean that you don't quit. I watched because of multi-generational living. Everyone that could work, worked. If you were able-bodied, you were working. And I watched how that took care of light, gas, heat, electricity, like everybody's resources came in to keep the home humming.
Because that's the first thing I think when I think of the size of those homes is like, how you gonna keep heat on in times like these. So you also mentioned detoxing as a nurse, and
Yeah.
right now, still what exists in what I guess what's labeled as the opioid epidemic. Opioids and the relationship with American opioids go back generations. So back to when you speak of Harlem, many of the jazz artists in those early days, in that Harlem Renaissance era, like they would even call it like you jazzing out, meaning like you getting high off of some form of opium, hence the heroin. And then obviously a wave that I'm guessing that your grandmother definitely dealt with was a lot of the soldiers that came back from Vietnam and coping from PTSD would struggle with different forms of
addiction
of heroin, and hence which led to all these methadone clinics being throughout communities. And Herman Kiefer was one of those spaces that would service a lot of folks. So Herman Kiefer, for a lot of people my age, they think it was just a clinic for people that may think that they got an STD, which it did provide that service as well. But it was a massive hospital.
Yeah, it was.
All types of county operations. I actually went there to get my food handler's permit first, but it was a lot of stuff going on, and it was way more active before. And your grandmother was dealing with that. And I'm guessing because so many of the soldiers that dealt with that were back in the community too.
That's right.
She was probably like having relationships with families that, knowing a person through recovery is a different type of relationship.
How about it?
So you probably walking through the grocery store, seeing people, and they stop in talking to your mom like the Coming to America scene with Vonnie Lee Curtis and Eddie Murphy, because it's a different, like, knowing, even to people in my family, I think recovery and getting through recovery and living past it, it takes so much strength to find that, because so many people that use, I believe, part of it is the addiction from me talking to people, but it's also like the whole culture of it. It's you get a friend set of people. It's the chasing to get high. It's how you find yourself and ground yourself, how you define yourself, because so much of the rest of the world looks at you like you're more worthless and useless.
That's right.
And this set of people look at you like, what up, though? Let's do something together. And then there's people such as your grandmother that played that role in healing. So that's a different type of relationship.
Yeah. And she served there, but she also served at her church. She was very much active in the kitchen. That her nickname was Sarge for Sergeant. She was running things.
Hilarious.
All 5 foot of her, because I don't even think she scratched any inches. It was 5 foot, a bucko 5 with wet clothes on. But she had such a big personality. It could fill up an entire room. And because of, again, the work that she did in the community, and then of course also in her job, and then again knowing no quit, she knew everyone everywhere. So when I was at Wayne studying Spanish, she would take me to Southwest to speak Spanish with her friend Miss Soto that she met in nursing. Puerto Rican woman. I'm at 7 years old at a quinceañera, and I'm like, how do you know that footprint? When you're nursing and you're healing, it's wide. And she had a great relationship with her colleagues So because of that relationship and her relationships with others, I'm like, Granny, who don't you know? She knew everybody.
And that, I guess, carries on just that age, seeing the way that being present in community carries on still with you today.
That's right.
Because it always made sense to you.
Always.
So I guess now let's get into your parents. During this time, as you're the grandkid, also being the kid, what are your parents doing? How what are you, what activities are they getting you involved in, and what are you connecting with?
So what I'm seeing, I did grow up in a more traditional way. So my dad wanted my mother to stay at home. But staying at home didn't mean necessarily kicking your feet up. She was active. We went to we went from Ridge, then moved to
like an old Redford area, right?
Yeah, that's right, old Redford area. Then from there, they saved up their money again, got a house in Southfield.
Okay.
So we were one of the first Black families. There was a story done on our family. And there, if you go to the Instagram of Black Detroit, they have a story on our family. And they're talking about, the flight of white flight, we're coming out of the rebellion. And we're talking about Jews, leaving the city and moving to Oak Park and Southfield, and then Black folks, moving as well. And what I found so interesting is that both my parents were non-traditional college students, so they got their degrees later. But what I appreciate is that my dad had a vision. He had a vision for himself. He had a vision for his family, and in that vision, he knew that unfortunately he had a sister that did OD. And I think that left a huge mark, on him. And also helped, again, the vision of safety. My oldest sister, who he was married before my mother, and had my oldest sister from that union, was on her way to school, and was almost accosted. And he said, "Nope, not mine."
Yeah. And
that really spurred the move more for safety. But again, that vision that he held for his family to be not just a provider, but also a nurturer. I remember my dad volunteering at school, and that wasn't something often that you would see men do. And in particular, you didn't often see Black men do.
What was he doing as a school volunteer?
He was a picture lady.
Oh, man.
Or the picture person. So he got really into the Harlem Renaissance. And so we're talking about a time where the population in Southfield Public Schools is shifting. So I was introduced by my dad to Henry Oshawa Tanner. And so he would do research on these, various Jacob Lawrence, he would do research on these various artists, Black artists, and then come in and teach the kids about who these. So think of if Sesame Street did artwork.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. You'd have this person come in.
He was like the cool family member on a Cosby Show episode.
There you go.
That come in and teach something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it would be these segments where parents would come in. I remember one parent was Chinese, and so she came in and taught us some, Chinese words, and taught us the difference of all the different dialects that existed in China, which I thought was really cool to me. So I think it kind of broadened my worldview and my perspective about who people are and how we relate to each other and the different languages. But the art piece, and then my dad coming in, I thought that was so cool.
Okay, because some people would look at it like, "Oh, I do not want my parents in here."
Yeah,
so no, I must have been really cool then.
My dad was cool. I'm gonna say, my dad kind of had like that Billy D. Williams thing, so it was. My dad's kind of fly, so you come in suited and booted, and today kids.
So lame dad would have been like,
Nah, my dad was smooth.
Okay, yeah, because I'm
pinky ring, yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, my dad was smooth.
Okay, all right. So, and then what era are we talking? Is this like 80s. Is this like late 80s?
Late 80s.
Okay, so late 80s. Also, just what's happening with Southfield as that transition as you talk about, like that feel so much is happening when we think
Yeah.
about just the culture of Southfield and Oak Park looking to establish themselves for so many black families that are becoming more affluent and saying to themselves, okay, we want to make this our own and make this our own city. And Southfield was definitely one of those
Oh yeah.
strongholds. You know?
Absolutely. Like you said, Southfield, Oak Park,
Mhm.
we're definitely the kind of like meccas, right, as we're crossing 8 Mile. And I've jokingly said to people, I was like, I felt like I had like dual residence
Mhm.
because my grandparents still
Were
lived,
here.
still were in the city. And so like I said, my father's side, Southwest Detroit,
Mm.
great aunt, North End area near, near Highland Park, still going to church at St. Matthew's, St. Joseph's. Now my grandfather and my grandmother, they divorced. But his home over off of Oakman. So we talking about like Joy Road, Southfield,
So,
area.
so like you're kind of getting a taste of a lot of different communities, even at an early age.
Even at an early age. Yeah.
And then I guess that kind of goes to like your journey within school. So from there, you're kind of bouncing around a little bit in these moves. How did you take on being a new kid? Because you were the new kid a couple times.
Well, I would say this. Consistently we stayed in Southfield, but on the weekends and during spring break, midwinter break, always over to relatives' house. I mean, I'm talking we would stay there weeks at a time, 2 weeks at Christmas break. That's like 3 weeks. So again, it's like that dual residency.
And that's where, like, I guess the new kid would be more so in these different spaces and places, but you pick up, so you're kind of known.
Yeah.
But it'd be like different in reintroductions as you grow older.
Right.
So now I guess I would go to high school because I'm guessing at the time you got Lathrop and you got Southfield. Where do you go?
Lathrop.
Okay, all right. So I know for people that's out there, they're like, "What's going on?" Southfield and Lathrop at one point in time it was a little bit. It's a huge rivalry. It's a huge rivalry. What was your Lathrop experience like?
That's where I really felt like I was able to come into my own. I would say that Spanish classes there for me rivaled any part of my college Spanish education because my Spanish teacher was not playing with us. I had to conjugate 501 Spanish verbs before I graduated.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
What drew you to Spanish?
I'm gonna be honest with you. Initially, I was lazy. I didn't want to do German. I thought that was too hard.
Guten Tag. I'm just like,
I was like, I didn't want to do that, and so I had an option. Either it was going to be Spanish or German. No, I think maybe French. But Spanish just seemed cooler. And who knew that it was going to be more useful, particularly in this area.
Everything you've done.
Right. And everything that I've done. And especially here, like there are times, Kari, even now, when I'm over at Hope of Detroit, for example, teaching poetry, I don't have to speak English from the time I get into the building to the time I leave. I can go to the gas station, fill up, love the food at the gas station because, they got a whole kitchenette situation that gets down over there. And so if I don't want to, I do not have to speak English.
Well, and I guess with this, because in that era, I guess like we're thinking like early mid 90s. I'm guessing as time goes on, maybe even like that, we're hearing so much about the influence, and just here in Detroit, we know Southwest Detroit exists.
That's right.
It's nothing like a lot of what's happening across the nation, especially throughout the 90s, to feel it. And like, this is why I started Detroit is different, because this is such a cliquish town. And if you don't really go into these neighborhoods, you don't know
mess with you, like,
what's going on in these neighborhoods.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You have no idea that it's like off East State Fair. It's a whole West African population over there. You know what I'm saying? But unless you know people over there, you may drive through, but you're unaware. So with this being said, you just happen to kind of, let me go and take the class, and you take to it so much. Was that through the teacher, or was that through your own interests, or kind of a mix?
I would say a kind of a mix. I mean, I was really blessed to have great teachers that really saw something in me and it poured, into me. And then, like I said, with us having Southwest Detroit, you really want to cut your teeth
Mm.
and put something into practice, that's where you go.
Mm.
So dad already being from the area.
And unlike others, it was a natural connection for you. It's not like you can just drive. And that's one of the weird things. And we can speak a little bit about that because you do so much work in diversity. When people say, well, you got to meet a person, it's hard to say to yourself, like, I don't know any Haitians, so I'm here in the Haitian community. How are you doing, Mr. Francois? It's not natural in human nature. I think it could be natural maybe to like start at a restaurant, and then from a restaurant, you may be able to kind of go enough where you build a relationship there, a rapport, a cafe, a diner, or whatever. Right. With that being said, that takes a different commitment of if you already got people over there, you can just go over there and be like, hey, what's up?
That part. And like I said, my grandmother being a nurse and, who she's
having those
relationships, and this is where they live. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, it's nothing to say, well, my baby's taking Spanish classes. She needs somebody to practice with. And I mean, if we really want to get down into like, nuances and dialects and, culture, Mexican Spanish is not the same as Puerto Rican Spanish. It's not the same as Cuban, different. Right? Dominican, like there's different words. So it's like I got this textbook version, which is not going to help me in real life, talking to real people. And so that allowed me an opportunity to really make some real connections, but also really understand the culture, and which also helps you, like you said, in the diversity work. I think this is really important to lift up and name. When we look at the plight of the Latina community, the Black community, so many similarities right there. Mm-hmm. So many things impact us with, whether it be health, socioeconomics, skin color, because colorism, that's a thing too.
I would say it's an extreme thing,
right? In both communities, hair texture, mm-hmm. In the Spanish speaking world, Latina culture, you'll hear things like "tu abuela en el armario," which means your grandmother in the closet. Mm-hmm. So that means you can see a couple of generations, not too many generations back. Somebody was black.
And very much like so many Black Mexicans in Mexico.
That's right.
The Black soldiers that fight on behalf to free Mexico. Like it's so many relationships.
Well, the state of Guerrero, and, named after, General Guerrero, that's a Black man. So they have a Black president before the United States. Mm-hmm. The La Bamba, African roots, fandango. La Bamba, African.
I didn't know that.
Right there. Right in plain, you know what I mean? A lot of this stuff sometimes is like it's in plain sight.
And also, like Black and race is everywhere, but it's such more of an American thing. Yeah. Culture and caste systems are so many other places, but race is such an American thing.
Nobody does racism like America.
Nobody does it. And it makes sense because of the institution of enslavement being the justification for enslaving people. Mm-hmm. It functions differently here, more so than any other place. And on this journey also in learning it, like you already mentioned, past high school, you go to Wayne. Which and still taking up Spanish. Mm-hmm. Why did you choose Wayne? And why did you choose Spanish?
Wow. So I did 2 years at Alabama State.
Okay.
Before coming up and finishing at Wayne.
What was Alabama State like for you?
Well, just how you said, Detroit is different. We are different. And I took a lot of things for granted. We hear things like chocolate city. Detroit is a chocolate city. So, Detroit, talking about all these places that you and I have touched on. I didn't know that in other parts of the country it wasn't like what we had. I was sharing with someone recently about seeing so many Black news anchors in the 80s. I'm talking about Kathy Adams, Harmon Harlan, Doris Biscoe, Diana Lewis, a little bit later, like Carolyn Clifford. But for me to name that many, like Black, like You don't have to guess what they are. Black, blackity black.
Yep. And I gotta uplift Charlene Mitchell Rogers.
Come on.
Charlene's gonna be like, Kari, now you know. I'll get a phone call from Charlene. There you go.
Yeah. Seeing that, I didn't know that other markets, other places didn't have it like that. And that and we have our conversations in Detroit about sometimes the lack of cohesion in our community, but comparatively in other areas, my blackness, I was considered uppity.
You were like you were considered uppity, you think, to them because of what your standards were?
Because of what my standards were, the way I own my blackness. I had a very interesting debate with a humanities teacher about the location of Egypt. She wanted to argue me down that Egypt is located in the Middle East, and I'm looking at a map, and we're all looking at a map. And I'm like, if this doesn't say, Egypt is in Africa. And so, there was this tirade back and forth about how, no, it's not. It's considered part of the Middle East. And I said, I'm talking about Cleopatra, Black Cleopatra. We're talking about the dawn of civilization here. Man. Yeah. But see, when you grow up going through a rites of passage program, so shout out all to the mamas and the babas of the community. When you grow through a rites of passage program, the whole premise is to teach you who you are. So I didn't go down there searching for blackness or a black identity. I had one. My name is Ber-Henda. So, I'm already going through the world.
I was going to say, you definitely, yes. Your resume, it's no.
So I'm going through the world, not only black, but black and proud, and black with a sense of self and identity. And then I even took her back, biblically speaking, the black presence in the Bible. We're talking about Ham and Hamites. We're talking about Nubia. Lady, this is not the Middle East. This is Africa.
That's deep. That's deep. And like what I often tell my homie Piper, you was like, I lean off of a different world as we were introduced to Jada Pinkett.
And guess what? And she still failed my ass too.
She sure did.
She sure did.
She was like, I don't need this.
Right.
And I could easily see, like, at that time when you're making that transition, from kid to adulthood and on your own, and it's like, no, I'm gonna get my point across. And I could definitely see also the ego of any professor thinking to themselves, okay, I can't be upstaged by a student. And I'm broad stroking here. It's a lot of, I'm sure, professors that let students teach the class. With that being said, that's not what's in general. What's in general is you want to present yourself as an authority so that it can move forward with whatever lesson. But definitely something like that stands out where it's like, I got to get out of here.
And I'm not really a debater, like argumentative person, but this was I can't sit here and let a blatant lie, especially when I'm sitting in a classroom with other people that look just like me.
Yeah.
And may or may not, again, coming from Detroit, Metro Detroit area, going through a rites of passage program, and I shout out to all the parents that put that program together. Because
where at?
So Hope United Methodist Church.
Okay, at Hope,
under the direction of Dr. Carlisle Fielding Stewart III. So we also talking about black, in terms of
the relationship between the African thought of spirituality being grounded in Detroit. I think we uplift the Shrine of the Black Madonna so much, but also the relationship between the African Methodist churches.
Come on.
Here in Detroit, it runs deep.
That's right.
It runs deep. So seeing kente cloth in a pool pit is nothing new in Detroit, whereas it's definitely certain places, where definitely, I jokingly sometimes tell my family members, it's like, I'm going to need my freedom papers down there. Freedom papers.
Correct.
Meaning that we're seeing the arc of things in a different way of how we see blackness and what black people can do. Because as much as certain things are very explicit, meaning that they will tell you what you can and cannot do, and overt, a lot of it with the racism today and in a lot of spaces like that is very covert and implicit.
Talk to him.
So
come on, talk to him, Kari.
I'll give an example. It'll be like, so who do you think is the best president of the 2000s? You'll be like Barack Obama, and then they'll be like, that's what you're going to go with, and you think that that's going to have the reach of a whole room. Now, I didn't just tell you to not pick Barack Obama, but I'm telling you not to pick a Barack Obama. And it's things like that that I believe that a lot of people get put into, where sometimes what I would say is definitely not said. That's why I'm not in certain rooms in the first place.
But what's interesting is that I get in them and then things come out of my mouth and they were like, who let her in here? How did she slip past us?
Yep.
Smooth taste, I guess, apparently fooled you. So, but I want to come back to the African presence, as you were saying, in divinity and in church here.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, kente cloth, it not really being a thing. But also, if I even go back to St. Matthew, St. Joseph's, the saints were black too.
Mm-hmm.
So any iconography that you would typically see in an Episcopal church or a Catholic church, usually the iconography is white.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Nick Ashford from Ashford and Simpson was Jesus growing up. Because again, my perception was Jesus was black. There is a very black Jesus still to this day in the sanctuary at St. Matthew, St. Joseph's with the long hair. So I was like, okay, so Nick Ashford must be Jesus. And homeboy from Earth, Wind, and Fire, I guess that's Moses.
Bernine.
So I'm thinking like, okay, black. I'm seeing in my mind because they were divine.
Yeah, and even all these arcs in Detroit, and that's one of the projects I want to work on. I guess we work.
Yeah, we work
together.
Yeah, because the juices are.
I want to do a profile of all the black Jesuses throughout churches in Detroit.
Come on, Black Jesus.
Because it's so many of them. Because I always love the story of the black Jesus right there on the corner at the Catholic church that was painted during the rebellion. And it, and the priest and them said, no, let's just let it stay.
Leave it.
Now, the reason I think they said just leave it was because they didn't want the place burned down.
Yeah, they wanted more smoke.
It's still a very bold act. The intentionality behind it, I'm sure some of my African historians would be like, well, brother, yes. Still, letting it stay is so Detroit, because it's not a lot of cities where I think in front of a very strong, like, far-reaching institution like Sacred Heart Seminary that, like, gets money funneled in from from what's going on over there in Italy and all of that stuff. You know what I'm saying? So from the archdiocese directly, like a big pulpit will have a black Jesus painted and like, nah, just let it stay. It's probably like Detroit, New Orleans, Baltimore. Other than that, I think every other place would be like, no. Hard no. So the rites of passage, what was that experience like? And I know we're going a little back in time, because so many times when people talk about uplifting and pouring into an intergenerational connection and grounding people in a sense of identity, which it obviously did, and who you are and where you are.
I mean, to have, this group of parents, I want to say it's maybe about a dozen or so parents that put this curriculum together. I mean, I received a poem, from one of the parents, Dear Black Woman, to affirm my black identity, to move through, a series, Watching Eyes on the Prize, and, talking about the Edmund Pettus Bridge. We had even a vocabulary list, and on the vocabulary is words like genocide and apartheid. They wanted us to know and understand what those words mean. And then having to interview elders in my family. Like I had to interview the oldest living relative that I could find in my family, and then getting heirlooms, from them, whether it be a brooch or, a hair ornament. At the time, you're not really able to contextualize what the gravitas of it, of like what it means. But when you get older and you understand that there's a transference of energy, there's a transference of spirit that now, comes to you. You're the next in line. So all of this knowledge that was accumulated when I was 12 years old, it stays with me. And so when I can show up in a classroom and 10 toes down, I'm not just arguing with you for argument's sake. This is a truth. And again, I didn't realize that was a very unique experience. other Black children don't necessarily grow up that way. We have freedom schools here. That is not something that is pervasive in other parts of the country.
So a couple of different things I want to contextualize classic Kari in these. Eyes on the Prize, a documentary series about the civil rights movement that was produced through PBS, and I believe it ran at least once a year as far as I can remember growing up through, even more so than Roots. And this is no shade or whatever to Roots, but this documentary series was just a known nights event where we will watch it. It will be other kids that will watch it, but to watch it again, the whole thought process of these stories and those connections. And now at this age, I look back and I say, damn, those people were like still in scope back to like this stuff is not that long ago. It's painted as if it's that long ago, especially as the chaos of the information about, critical race theory, which has nothing to do with, I think, what most people think it has something to do with. And a lot of states like Florida not having Black history, which in some ways I understand the argument. The reality is we shouldn't be relying on the state of Florida to teach Black history in the first place. That's Kari Frazier thought. We need to do this ourselves. Hence the institutions like rites of passage that are poured in from our own community stand so tall and so essential. And you also talked about freedom schools. Yeah. So the concept of a freedom school is similar to a lot of what the Panthers were doing, even as such young brothers and sisters, because that's really what I recognize when I think of the Panthers so much now, because people think about the Panthers and think, wow, they was doing a lot. They were doing a lot at like 24, 25, 26, young. 18, 19. They were extremely young and still gathered a lot of the support of most people in the community, because when they started, and I'm sure Dr. Yusuf Bunchy Shakur is going to be like, no, that's not wrong, but I'm speaking from my uncle that was a Panther and a couple of the people I know in Chicago. My uncle that was at the school like around the corner from where Fred Hampton was, rest in peace. A lot of the support of the community came when they started reaching out and connecting with those kids, and what became the Head Start program that America has adopted.
Come on.
So that's like the iteration of where we start with the ideas of what freedom schools could be. So it's community taking on its own stance of educating, growing and grooming young people into the society that we would like to see. That includes the food, that includes the culture, because so much of who we are is, well, food is a part of our culture too, but like the culture is so intertwined in this, whereas I believe in westernized education is separate. It's not all inclusive. Hence, watching that Luther documentary recently has it fresh in my mind. The reason Sesame Street is built like it's built, from the look of Harlem and the feel, but the songs and the dances, is because it was more so built from the concept of like, how do you connect to Black kids? That's why it's so many songs. That's why it's so much culture. That's why we're watching Sesame Street and feeling as though this is an experience, not quote unquote academia. But that's all Black education. You get the right Black professor, it's going to be songs, it's going to be music, it's going to be dance, it's going to be food, it's going to be everything that makes everything up. So I just wanted to share that about freedom schools. It's not just what is taught, it's the style of how it's taught, it's the people that lead them, it's a movement itself. So,
and I think that that's initially what had attracted me to go to school down south, because initially I thought it was something that I was missing. I wanted to be, we saw a different world, because you're talking about the time period in which I went. So, I'm thinking like, I'm going to be like Lisa Bonet, and I'm going to go down here and have this.
And all of them.
Yeah. Hellman like experience. But I ended up feeling much like Dorothy and, The Wiz. There's no place like home, but home is in here. I'm going to be a Black person no matter where I am in the world. And I take all those experiences. I take my ancestors everywhere I go. There is Blackness. So it's not something that I had to search for. It just is. So came back up here, came back to Wayne State, still had this knack for Spanish. Had a conversation with a guidance counselor about how to track, what kind of academic track did I want to go down. And ironically, I'm kind of coming back to a dream, which was I actually wanted to be a news anchor at one point.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to be a news anchor. But at the time, again, even though I'm seeing all these Black women, size mattered. I'm not a petite, woman. So I was thinking, like, no, there's no way I can do that. So I said, well, where can I find some security? All right, I got this Spanish. All right, business. So I thought that'd be the track that I would go down until one fateful day while I was working at Sears. In comes a man who was buying a anniversary gift. Now, mind you, man comes in, gets an anniversary gift for his wife. We speak Spanish the whole time. He was like, you sure you don't want to go into education? I was like, no, I now want to go into education. He was like, no. He was like, look, I have an eye for talent. I really think that you have something here. We had a conversation, opening at his school, and that's when, I guess divine intervention and my pathway is rerouted. I go down the pathway of education. So that's how I ended up being a Spanish teacher.
Okay. All right. So I definitely got to ask, what ages do you start and how did you like it?
Oh, wow. So I did everything from K all the way up to 12th grade. And what I like now, for so many years, I was just against elementary. I do not want to do them. I don't like them. Definitely did not want to do. I did one stint of middle school. They smell. I cannot do. I can't do middle school.
Puberty.
I'm telling you, puberty and attitude. I said, oh no. I can't do that. Give me 10th grade, second semester. Because your first semester, they're still ninth graders. But there's this maturity
hilarious
shift that happens in like that second semester where you start to see them can really come into their own. Juniors are real cool. But I would say seniors, as soon as their senior year hits, in their minds, they have graduated.
Oh, man.
They are over everyone and everything. It is just this path to all they see is prom. And then that's that's it.
Okay.
But I am really enjoying third and fourth grade because everything is new and different and they're open and only thing they want to talk about is planets and dinosaurs.
Okay. So getting in that classroom and developing a voice there.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing your classroom, just from knowing you, has so much more of the culture into it as well. Yeah. We meet paths in the realm of spoken word itself. Are you performing, writing? What are you doing like as this time in the teaching? What gets you started in that world?
All of it. So, during the day, obviously I'm teaching, but I'm a spoken word artist going to Key Club and Cafe Mahogany and
rest in peace, Sparrow, as you live Key Club.
Peace, yeah.
When's the first time you perform spoken word that you remember in that space, like a Key Club?
I want to say it had to be around 2001, 2002.
Okay. What was it that drew you in? Were you already going and then you like, I'm gonna go up here and say something?
I think that, I think I finally got the nerve. You go a couple of times and you finally get the nerve. But at the time, nobody was doing anything in Spanish or another language. So both the hemispheres of my brain are going. And so I would write in Spanish. And so I would get up there and do bilingual poetry. And then that just kind of became my thing. Is that I would do both. Yeah, Spanish and English poetry.
So I can only imagine like the start and to think that you would be thinking to yourself like, all right, let me wait to hit a mic. Just knowing you now because the way your presence on a mic and performing and what that experience was. So you got to remember the first time you go. What was the reception? How did you go about selecting what you performed? What was that?
Wow. It was well received. And I think it's also, of course, the way in which a host sets the culture for the space.
Okay.
Right. So if you have a host that encourages love and support and respect, that's what the space is going to yield. So being able to move back and forth in language was definitely a gift and something to to this day, being able to do bilingual poetry all stem from that opportunity and moving through the fear. And in poetry culture, for those who are not aware, they call them virgins to the mic. And so even if you are Maya Angelou, you will be that's her first time in the space, you are a virgin to the mic. And so they got to show you a whole lot of love, and you got to clap it up all the way up. Every host has their own flair. So clap it up all the way up. Finger snaps and hand claps, that's more Joel's thing. Phoenix may say, coming up next to the microphone, leaving all that crack alone. Like everybody has like their own, way that they host or bring people up. But I think that what makes poetry, and particularly poetry at that time, so unique, I think people, again, looking for community, looking for a place to belong. Poetry definitely in many ways is deep and it's personal and it's cathartic. It helps you process, as you named here, the various epidemics that exist in the Black community. So, if we're talking about disenfranchisement as a whole, we're talking about substance abuse, we're talking about familial dynamics, and just even trying to sort oneself out in my relationship in the cosmos and the greater world. What better tool than poetry or any other form of art to help you process where you are and process those bigger emotions? And so it created a space. So, shout out to the intellectual divas. I don't know if you had them on the show yet, but Nick Wells and yeah. So we all kind of came through in that same era.
So, and I do look at it like I tell the rappers, like, we have graduation classes, kind of.
And you have classes in that class.
Legacy, rest in peace, Legacy.
Yep, legacy, rest in peace.
I don't know how much Legacy's always uplifted, but just warm spirit. And then even like the style of poetry there, and that makes so much sense because you're right. That was a moment where the divas would give something, which right now it's just a different arc. It's a different moment, a different feel that exists. I saw Phelps and T. Miller the other day at the event where I saw you.
Nice.
With the community day that Motor City, Jack and Jill, Teen Hype, Ambra, and I often think about like, okay, that flair and that feel, and more so like kind of how you come in leaves an expectation similar to a lot of different cultures, but being open to what changes. So as you develop that voice, even being bilingual, I think some of what you provide on the mic is you get into some of the more impactful and more real stories, especially from the lens of a woman, but it still has like a space where I'm not feeling like I tell Fluent sometimes. It's like sometimes, I'll go and it's like I need another layer, because sometimes the trauma can be so strong where it's like I don't even know where to go from this. It's like I don't know if I'm you know what I'm saying? I don't know. I can't clap really. It's like I feel like getting up and hugging you, but I don't know if that do anything. Like, whereas you've explored some of the deeper things, and just to me, in my interpretation. So, for those that haven't been to spoken word events, I would urge you all to kind of go to kind of know what I'm speaking of here. And I still appreciate the artistry of it. How do you approach going into some of these deeper themes, but still allow, I think, a level of, for me, understanding even for an audience? As you gave a piece at most recently that I remember, the Round Table.
Oh, yeah.
Had an event at Northwest Activity Center where you gave a very heavy piece about a lot of what women face, and it still had ground to breathe, I believe, a little bit beyond the like hitting a wall where it's like, damn.
Well, I think that in any movement, in any place where you're trying to enact change, social change, revolution, hope is important. Because why else are you doing it? We got to have some sense of hope. And yes, while the pieces for that particular event that you were heavier, I never want to leave a heaviness without a glimpse of hope and possibility, because we're doing the work. You're doing Detroit is different, I believe, as a give back to your community that raised you and that loved you, but also to bring to others an awareness of what's going on and how it impacts Black folks and how it impacts Black folk in the city of Detroit. But I think that the way in which we Black people have been able to endure is because we also have joy. Congo Square, has been that space that even when we were enslaved, we still had music, we still had dance, we still had our own prayers, we still had ways that we had woven our African traditional religion into synchronization, because we wanted to believe that tough times wouldn't last always. And so having that hope and that anchoring and that grounding, even if we're going to get into heavier pieces, we want to get it off our backs and out of our bodies, because our spirits are never touched.
So I guess, and I know this is very hard for you to answer per se for them, but we can at least speak to it. A lot of some of the stuff, I think, from some of the younger artists, they kind of hit that wall without that space of hope. Yeah. Do you think that that's more of a reflection of the experiences they're having and where we stand as society now? And what should be our response to that?
Well, what I am hopeful and grateful to see now that I haven't seen in generations prior, particularly as an educator, we are moving into social emotional learning. So I am grateful that in some ways, like for example, I'm in some of the schools during the midday, they'll take a moment to meditate. Like they'll come over the loudspeaker and they'll play like some kind of like tranquil music. And I'm like, this never happened. I'm grateful for the space to that. Or doing check-ins and check-outs where we are literally just asking them, how are you? Where are you today in this moment? So having the conversation about even mentally where they are. But on a larger scale, what I am seeing, and I've been having some conversations even with parents too, we are looking at an epidemic of loneliness. Even though we have all this technology and we're more connected than ever before per se, but we're still not connected to ourselves, and we're not having conversations on a regular basis, much like this, right? So I am seeing, unfortunately, just like this epidemic of not only loneliness, but sadness and grief. I mean, these are babies that watched a public lynching. We went into COVID. And so now that you're at home and, you're not allowed to go anywhere, I think we're paying attention. We've started to pay attention more because, well, we don't have any other, we can't go anywhere. And then followed by Breonna Taylor and, Julius Jones. So we're seeing all of this at the same time as contending with a global pandemic. Of course, that has an impact on your psychology, and it has an impact on your spirit. So where they hit a wall, I don't know that they even know what hope is or what it can look like. But I pull on our ancestors. But I think I'm able to pull on that, as you've heard throughout this interview. I come from a community where wisdom is passed down from one generation to the next. We're singing while we're washing collard greens, or we're talking. I'm being asked about my life, my little 5-year-old, 6-year-old life, what's happening in school. I know that somebody cares about me. I'm being checked on. I'm being thought about. And those things might seem small, but how many of our babies actually have someone? And I think this is why teachers are so important. I would literally, when I was teaching, I would have students tell me, I'm their school mama.
Hmm.
You remind me of my auntie, Miss Williams.
That's deep. And I love that you framed it in that reference, looking for that empathy of how that connection is happening. And I want you to expand a little bit when you talk about the loneliness, as when we just finished State of Black Detroit, and Sherry Smith, that works with community movement builders and also Detroit Black Community Food Sovereignty Network, she spoke about community organizing, and in it, she left as saying that one of the biggest challenges is the isolation that people feel. And it really made me stop and reflect on things. And you spoke to that loneliness and isolation. Can you expand a little bit? Because you said it's really from ourselves. Unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, if we are constantly bombarded with messages about not enoughness and not your being not being enough, again, we got all kinds of messages, not just who we interact with on social media, but the algorithm picking up on what it perceives to be an interest to us. So you've got now the weight loss drugs, and you've got, the filters. So it's like I can augment my facial features, my skin complexion to be something other than who I am, because I don't have anyone in my life affirming the beauty that I am, just naturally, just being the way that God intended me to be. Then the conversations that are being had, even in the music, a lot of the music is, the love songs don't even exist anymore. So, you're hearing me talk about coming from an era where love songs, there was an aspiration. My father aspired to be a husband. That was part of his metrics of success, was not just an ability to climb a corporate ladder, but my measure of a man is my ability to be a husband and to be a father. That was an aspiration. We got these Cam Newtons out here, and these voices in these podcasts. Again, we're seeing a lot of cantankerous discourse between Black men and Black women. High value this and high value that, and what does she bring to the table and what does he bring to the table? And it's like we're extracting, we're not connecting. And I would say that this creates, to me, a detriment in our community, because again, we're trying to be something other than who we are, so that we can be loved, be validated, be accepted, get one over on, because we think that our survival is predicated on what we can get. And as you've heard throughout this interview, when I'm talking about our principles, I was loved just because. And I know a lot of us don't necessarily have that, but I was loved just because.
It's interesting you bring that up. And I often say, like, to think to ourselves the type of analysis that can be done when we really analyze what these devices have changed for all of society. It's so many ways to look at things. And the older I get, it's hard to believe in what's good or what's bad. So much is in variance and relativity. I can say this as a person in this space, similar to hip hop. Like, I'm in the podcast, I'm in the content creation space, and I've been here for a while. And similar to hip hop, so much more of this needs context. And being that it's so short, that's why my interviews are so long, because I appreciate the brevity and the length to really contextualize as much as possible, especially a discussion with someone like you that can uplift things and we can go deeper into things. And even in saying this, I know that I'm going to chop this up. I'm going to put these in portions of like 75, 90 seconds. And that's going to be what a lot of people grab onto, because how we've conditioned ourselves even to receive information. And so much context is needed when you talk about, especially the dynamics of black men and black women, or black parents and black children, or, whatever. That generation did it bad and this generation's doing it better or whatever. I do believe that in a lot of, as they say, like a great lie has truth in it, meaning that in a lot of these arguments, it is, there are some premise of fact, if we want to say that. But understanding what that premise of fact versus how it resourcefully impacts us, and to contextualize where that comes from our state of our presence of mind, that takes a larger understanding back to like in learning a language. It's like now you're getting into like the dialect of something that goes so much deeper than what that surface of that 10 seconds that you come out and then you see what this is. And almost like sports fans, people pick sides or something, like I'm for this and I'm for that and I'm for this. Whereas I do believe that it takes so much more of a deeper analysis before we even can make those decisions. One of my favorite stories in African proverb is a child asks the man in the village that's like the elder or woman a question. Elder went to the mountaintop, came back 3 weeks later with the answer. All of these answers. It was just a simple question of like, okay, what's the best way to get food for my family? I can give you the quick answer, but contextually, you need so much more deeper analysis, because it may be go to McDonald's because it's fast, but then it could be you need to start a garden. It could be you need to move to a climate that's best for the type of food that you need to garden to feed you. It could be you need to build a relationship with the people there that have those gardens there, so you're in season with the food for you and your community, because the more people in your community that can help are there. Now, all of these are answers to the same question. It's just how deep can we go? But if you only think that the answer to that is a Big Mac, I think that that's stopping short. And I do believe that in this space of content creation, so much is, as you said, because it's so augmented on like wherever your interests are, wherever your interest lies, especially when we get into AI coming into the play. And I do believe, like everything, these are tools that can be useful. Absolutely. And like every tool, back to variance, like everything that can be constructive can be destructive.
And this is where we have to fortify our consciousness as people. But we do that when we know who we are. And as we started this whole conversation, you're essentially asking me, who is Ber-Henda Williams? But who I am and who I'm becoming and who I've been has been shaped. And it's been shaped by those around me. It's been shaped, yes, by my bloodline. Also, again, like I was doing the compare and contrast, I was glad that I got out of Detroit to have some perspective. And this is no dig to, being at Alabama State for 2 years. Also traveled abroad. And there were some things that I definitely saw, like I got sick in a foreign country. And my first words out of my mouth, because I've been conditioned as I don't have insurance in this quote unquote, in this country. They told me it didn't matter. They won't see me anyway. I couldn't wrap my head around that. I was like, wait a minute, what? 'Cause we don't do that here. But they said, no. They were bewildered. Like they were looking at me like, you just passed out, hit your head. What you like? And your concern is if we're going to see you or not. And
that I think undergirds a lot of some of that isolation that you speak of, and even that relationship to self. So the times when I think, just going back to self, when I feel most isolated or lonely, it's the times when I'm not, which I know people say this is crazy, but it's the healthiest thing you can do. It's just, as they say, don't answer. When I'm not having a conversation with myself, when I don't have the courage to say what it is that I know I need to say, because as you say, getting it out is the first step to whatever it is that
it's to heal.
I have to address. Yeah. It's like you have to recognize the challenge and then either accept the challenge and the growth through the process or accept how to live around what that challenge is. But either way, I have to accept the challenge. And it's so many brothers that I speak to that I feel like just are adrift as the relationship with blackness in America is tough. With black men in America, it's even tougher right now because, as I always say, America's designed for white men with property and businesses, and even white men. And they're going through a whole nother thing because that's the design, but the design is completely crumbling around itself right now. It functions best that way.
Right.
For black men, I mean, we're enslaved in this arc of America being, 60, even before America exists, we're enslaved. Then I believe a lot of our functionality was in industrial work when this was more of an industrial nation. Post-industrial nation, the functionality of black men and then that pressure, even the young men I interact with, the pressure of wanting to be a millionaire. When I think to myself, like, you ever met a millionaire? Are you interacting with a millionaire? And it's like, I got to be a millionaire by 30.
And it's like, where are you picking that narrative? And now it's become hardwired for you to aspire toward being a millionaire, but you don't even know when that got planted. Like, they can't even pinpoint
Yes.
to you, like, when, because like that's a very fundamental question to ask. Do you even know any millionaires? So why do you aspire to be? And I'm not, I believe that economic justice is also social justice. So, I'm kind of nerdy. Like when I go to the DIA, I like to see who's giving like on that wall to see like, what families. And then I try to see how many black people are, and so even with that, it's like, generational, wealth building is definitely important. But that's so curious that there's the drive to be a millionaire. But it's like, who told you that?
And who told you that? What does it look like? I believe one of the most corrosive concepts in America is this idea of rugged individualism. Because so many people profess that they've done it on their own. And I would argue that even the person that doesn't have anything, at least two people came together to create that human being. The more that I've gotten, it's all a reflection of the community and the support. And some of that support is happening behind me. Some of it's through prayer, some of it's through meditation, some of it's people looking out for you that it's like people throwing you a lick that you don't even know. Sometimes people you may not even necessarily like per se, but they're like, nah, that's the best person for it because you put the work in, quote unquote, or they've seen you moving, or they want to provide an opportunity. Either way, this idea that people are self-made
doesn't exist. It's a lie. I think that's one of the biggest lies. But again, white supremacist delusion is delusional. This rugged individualism, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, man versus nature. Why would you want to be against God? Man versus nature. What happened to man or human being with co-creating? When we get back to more of our indigeneity and where I feel just even as people we thrive because we understood that everything has cycles, everything has a rhythm, everything has a relationship, and to be in right relationship when we're talking about the epidemic of loneliness, but even being in right relationship with yourself to even put you in a position to be, this millionaire. And again, if I'm being transparent, this is kind of an area that I'm investigating even more, for myself, because we're also in an age where we're seeing, manifest this and you can manifest that. And it's like, I do believe in the power of thought. Thoughts do shape our reality. But at the same time, are we just after things? Are we just after feeding our egos? Or are we about the business of making sure that we have a legacy? And are we have the business of watching? Because just that easy, how you ask that young man that question, why do you want to be a millionaire? Like, where did you get that mindset or that thought from to where it's pervasive? And in this technological age, as we've moved from the industrial age, how can we make sure that our children are able to um, receive the benefits and the bounty of the technological age, where they could produce uh, content and get paid for it and have it monetized? Or, when we think about what was it, Isaac Hayes the third and fan base, right?
Mhm.
So how did he even come about the technology or the understanding or the people to even put the mechanism in place for you to create a platform that could potentially rival, some of the other apps
Spaces.
in spaces? So you had a community. I know that you didn't do it by yourself,
Mhm.
but what does that look like when we harness that collective power? And I think that's the thing that always excites me, is of what the potential is when we can really be about cooperative economics, when we can really be about, like you said, even if it's someone that doesn't quote unquote like you, I think we have to get out of our feelings sometimes and
Yeah.
look at the bigger picture.
I often have so this is definitely a very fruitful discussion now, because now we're as we say, we breaking bread, as they say. And I think I believe the key assets we as a people bring to the table are creativity and social capital. That's where I believe we thrive most. The creativity is just known. We're very improvisational. An example I always give, an analogy.
Black people are jazz.
Jazz.
We the jazz.
I was gonna say I always give the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar example. So when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar left high school, he was such a prolific scorer. They said, we're gonna ban the dunk. They banned the dunk the year he goes to UCLA college. He creates the skyhook. It's the most unguardable shot in basketball history. That's in jazz, and there's so many things where black folks are doing things like that all the time. In our social capital, meaning we know how to gather things around, which is kind of connected to our creativity. And this is where I definitely know others, especially, Yusuf, in one of our discussion pushes back, because I'm speaking to generalizing this, because I do believe that as human beings, our focus is to heighten quality of life. It's just the lens in which we see things. And the balance of things for the lens of what European, because where Europe was a different climate. Things aren't as abundant. The society functions. So the functionality of pirates and Vikings and wars and ships and murder, it functioned a lot different than a lot of African civilizations. Were there wars in African civilizations? Yes. Were there slave trades in African civilizations?
Absolutely.
Yes. But the functionality and the brutality is nothing like that, because the distance between me and you in Greenland could be my family eating one extra week than not eating. Whereas if I'm in Ghana, it's like, okay, I'll just go over to this other tree and get some fresh fruit. So it changes things that goes over for like centuries and generations. And even the way that his story is written is from a lens of war and conquering, death, destruction. The American story, it's connected and told through the lens of murder, triumph, death. Even in, I guess what I would say, creativity. I often say, if me and you come together and make a science fiction movie, aliens aren't coming here to destruct us. They gonna come, we gonna party, we gonna kick it. You know what I'm saying? We gonna hang out. But from their lens, it's like, why would you even go to another world without wanting to extract from it? So this is like a intellectual viewpoint where, like, I think it goes into psyches that kind of go into, like, they say alcoholism lives in your DNA for 4 generations. So I can only imagine what's in your DNA from, like, the Scottish tribes that are fighting the English tribes. Just even the whole concept of Christianity and what Martin Luther did and all of those fights. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is a lot of murder, death. Western civilization historically is filled with so much horrors within itself, definitely looking at going into other parts of the world, it's definitely not from a lens of the same communal lens. Even the whole science of like when people talk about native tribes here saying like, oh, they were stupid for giving up their land. The concept of land
Their
ownership
psyche wasn't
land ownership is something that land ain't something you can own.
right.
Ownership itself is it's a very Western concept. So like you can't look at it through this lens and say, oh, they some suckers for doing that, because it's like
They have no concept of it. It didn't exist.
exactly.
Again, indigeneity, us people of color, melanation, we understand. We live with the land.
Mm-hmm.
We don't just extract, from it. Our ancestors, to the tobacco, like I mentioned with my grandmother, Alabama, that's cotton.
Mm-hmm.
On my
Arkansas.
that's right.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about cotton kingdoms
Yeah.
here, and from the way it was explained to me, you have to be mindful of planting, right? You have to be mindful of what soil and what elements need to be apparent, in the soil in order for growing. So that means you can't just come in and do whatever you want, to the land, like our ancestor George Washington Carver.
Mm-hmm.
They said that he had a conversation with the plants. That's how he was able to
Yeah.
find all those uses for the peanut, because he had a relationship.
And that is in the realm of, I think, where our creativity and where we're in that space of divinity, and in that same space, dealing with the arc of how we define self through this lens can be so overwhelming for so many of us. And that's also, I think, where the words and the poetry stand and people can kind of connect, because, the right poem
That's
is something people can grab onto as words to be like, oh, that made sense. And now I'm understanding more of life.
Mm-hmm. And it not only it made sense, but also that's my story too. I think that's where it opens a portal for connection, is that you can hear your story inside of a poem, someone else's lived experience. Maybe you couldn't articulate it. You didn't have the words for it. You didn't have language, but now you're hearing someone like, oh yeah. And that's validating.
So with that being said, I do want to hear, what are you working on now? And in that, I kind of also just have to ask, just in that same realm of creativity, when you write now, what inspires you?
Ooh. So when I write now, I'm moving through an interesting season of life. I am now in the, I guess as you will, that transitional period of child, adult, to now taking care of family members. My father has dementia.
Wow.
My mother made her transition almost about this time last year, so we're coming up on a year.
Wow. Condolences and
Thank
prayers
you.
up.
Thank you. So a lot of my poetry is around that, kind of trying to put my emotions someplace and to make sense of this part of life. Walking my mother home, I had the privilege of doing in-home hospice
Care.
Yep, care, exactly. And I walked my grandmother home.
So
all these people that poured into me, took care of me. It's my turn. Kari, it's my turn now.
And that is, first off, that takes a lot of courage. It takes understanding, and it takes presence. As anyone that has been in that caretaking space, especially for someone such as yourself, because life's going on,
all the
And
time.
caretaking, in a lot of ways, is you're watching someone that was your OG, someone you looked up to, someone that gave you guidance, now moving over into a space where now you are in that position. And what that looks like and what that journey is, it's very unique. And each person, just like a child, has something very signature. Dementia runs in my family. So Alzheimer's, dementia, that can be very heavy, and different experiences of like, okay, my aunt here was there and my aunt there was there, and having that patience. And then also, this is another thing. So many people in that caretaking can, as they say, even burn themselves out or really not. It's another one of those spaces in isolation, possibly. Cause, day one, everybody's like, yep, I got a day. I got some time. I got this. I got that. And then you may look up and it's just you walking into a doctor's appointment with somebody that maybe not necessarily the most the most eager to walk with you. And
Yeah.
balancing what that is, it definitely takes courage. It takes patience, but it's all out of love. And it's also a loving experience to do it. And I'm speaking to this because I applaud that you're writing into that. It's not a lot of tools to know, because really it's very intimate.
It is. And so I lean into community too. I let people know what I need, and I feel very blessed to have the love and the support of community to navigate, this. My parents have amazing friends because caregiving is also expensive. A lot of what is required, you got to come out of pocket for.
I want to break some of that down as, like I say, some of the caretaking responsibility that I have, so people kind of can know what this is. And I had to jump in myself. So I would say, first, develop a relationship with the primary care physician of whomever you're caretaking.
Right.
That I would say, lead with that, because that's going to be someone that'll navigate some of the medical journey with you and be more of an advocate, hopefully. And caretaking in some of these facilities, because the brochure and the commercials will make it be like, oh, come on in, just as they say, independent living, you're probably looking at, like, in a month, with a meal and everything, you may be spending somewhere between $1,350 to $1,500. Assisted living, and so you all get an idea of what assisted living is. Assisted living is you're in the same facility, and someone will do some checks a little bit more, probably like once a day, possibly help with a meal. That's probably like about $3,500 a month. If they call it memory care can be somewhere between $7,500 to $10,000 a month. And that's basically somebody's going to be in the hallway at the end of the hall. And if your loved one drifts away and they're going to do a couple more checks, that's what you're getting with memory care. And also the concept of, like, you're thinking like, oh, they're going to get some homies and they're going to find community. I'm not saying it's impossible.
Yeah.
Like, some of the work that Hand in House is doing is amazing and everything, but you also really have to connect. And I guess that's what the beautiful thing is about the relationship and community that your parents already had. Because to get a community, really, I'm going to say past the age of 30. I mean, I don't necessarily know if Drake needed to make the No New Friends song, because it's like, it's rare, period. Let alone if we're talking about somebody that's 60, 70, 80, like, and that's really what's needed most. And some of that interaction, could be some tough interactions. You may not necessarily be seeing people at their best because of what the experience is.
Yeah. No, and that's real because I mean, seeing your heroes, your pillar become so feeble and independent,
Yeah.
not aware of themselves, sometimes combative, a personality shift. And there's a reason why they call it the long goodbye, because it can last, quite a long time. And so you see, this descent, and dementia also came for my maternal grandmother. She had dementia. My dad's mother also had it. And so seeing in his is more early onset. So yeah, there's that piece, right? And entrepreneurship and community work and what that looks like. And so, as a glimpse into it, what am I working on creatively? I have a coffee table book that I'm working on.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, where we're sourcing not just a coffee table book, but also a business directory. And again, it goes back to some of the things that were planted on the inside of me, where we're sourcing for BIPOC, female identified business owners. So I'm talking about like the primary care physician, like the dentist, the gynecologist, the lawyer, things of that nature, so that it's in one place. So anywhere you go in the world, you can see someone who looks just like you.
That's deep. I definitely know that has value, especially like, when I think even in the caretaking journey, because Lord knows, like one of my aunties, just the amount of stylists and and nail techs we've gone through because I don't do that right. And it's like nobody does it right.
Right.
What are your standards, woman?
Yeah.
But here nor there. That's part of the journey and the connection of what to find. So knowing that can be uplifted. And I do think that, I'm looking to, when you get the book, let me know. I'm copping. So,
yeah.
And that brings us to a close. So classic Detroit is different questions. Okay. But even before we go there, if somebody wants to connect, how do they get to you?
So I'm the only Ber-Henda in the world. So you can literally Google Ber-Henda Williams and it'll take you everywhere. But you can go to my website, Ber-Henda, BER-HENDA Williams.com. All my social media channels are Ber-Henda Williams. I have a podcast myself called Soul of a Lead Her, for she who works and lives from the soul. You can check that out anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Culture Shift Hers Unite. Every season we do a live in-person event, but we also do some things online as well. And as I mentioned, we have the coffee table book that's coming. And, just again, all of this is possible because of community. I know I am not self-made, and it's not even something I even aspire toward being, because it's not necessary. It's not natural. Co-creation, being in community, leading from your values, and standing on principle, I believe really does open a lot of doors for you. So if anyone wants to learn more about my work and what I do, poetry and everything else, you can go to those places.
I love it. So classic. Very first car. Year, make, and model, year you got it.
Okay. Very first car was what was that? It was a Chevy Cavalier.
Okay, a Cav. Okay.
Chevy Cavalier.
What color?
Gray.
Okay.
It was gray, and I believe it was an 89.
What year you get it?
Ooh. I think it was 97.
Okay, all right. It had some age.
It had some age on it. And it had a hump.
Experience.
And it was all right. We loved it. We loved it. We were riding around.
What, did you name it?
You know what? Gray Ghost.
Gray Ghost. I like
Gray
it.
Ghost.
Where's the first place you went?
Probably Belle Isle.
You went straight to the Rock. I love it.
Probably Belle Isle.
I love it. I love it. I love it. That's that. It don't get more Detroit than that. You may win Detroiter of the Year for that.
Yeah,
because you are the first person that has answered it that way.
Really?
Yeah.
I was either on Belle Isle or 7 Mile to Better Mile.
Oh man, that's. I'm sure it's some East Siders because when I hear 7 Mile, I always be thinking.
We would ride both spectrums. Now I have friends on the west side, and I have friends on the east side, and we would go from West 7 Mile all the way down to East Sider Drive, State Fair area. So yeah, we would take that drive.
I'm gonna do a video essay on 7 Mile because it is the most. It's almost like Outer Drive itself, meaning that the interpretation that people get. That's how I probably got to do it. I'm gonna be like, when you hear 7 Mile, what you think? What cross section?
Yeah, you know what? Because East 7 Mile and West, those are totally different 7 miles.
I'm gonna say even parts of West 7 Mile because 7 Mile Livernois is completely different than 7 Mile in Southfield.
That's right.
And then when you get to 7 Mile and Telegraph, that's like a whole other culture.
That's a whole nother 7 Mile.
You know, and then people be like, I'm from the mile. And you be like, where?
Which part?
Exactly. And yeah. Like, I'm from 7 Mile and Van Dyke. It's like, oh yeah, you would think 7 Mile in Southfield or 7 Mile in Greenfield is like a whole nother universe.
Yeah.
So I may do that. That's
that'd be a dope project.
So awesome.
Okay.
Next question. You're the DJ at the end of the fireworks. Woodward and Jefferson. You get to play 2 songs. What songs you playing?
Okay. First song, because I feel like it's the end of the night. You do want to end it with something that is a crowd pleaser. So I'm going to go with the Quiet Storm version of Moments in Love.
Okay. You're going to have people trying to be like, hey, what's her name?
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Hey,
Detroit
okay,
Love.
there we go.
Detroit Love. Why not?
I love it.
Why not? And then work it. Work it.
You're gonna go from it's gonna go from the slow jam to the party.
Yeah. Why not?
All right, it went straight to Ghetto Tech. So I'm sure all the people that are watching from other places across America are like, what is she talking about? It is a form of music. You can check the archives of Detroit is different called Ghetto Tech, where it's techno, but it's also very ghetto. so it's like
it's always time for the percolator around here.
Yeah, it's Detroit is different, man.
That's all. You know what, Kari? That's really all we can say. Just come. You need to just pay us a visit, because I know that there's a lot of nuance of what we're saying in like context. It's like it would be like a person from DC trying to explain go-go.
Yeah, it's hard to explain Ghetto Tech.
Yeah, and it's like if you don't know what go-go is, you're like, what is that? You just have to be there.
Yeah,
because it's not Austin Powers, some girl in a cage I mean, that is go, but that's not what they're talking about.
And it definitely in Ghetto Tech, kind of like go-go, it's like people don't know the songs, they just be like Jail and Weave. It's like, and you're like, what are they talking about? And it's like people know just by
Let me see your check stub.
Yes. And it's like, what in the hell are they talking about?
Get your own checks. I mean, it would come on and we would just go, we would go crazy. That's my song. Put your, finger in your belt loop and do the tick. Oh, yeah, it was all of that.
It's
all that.
Very Detroit.
Very Detroit.
All right. Last question. You could rename Woodward after one Detroiter. Who would it be and why?
Rename Woodward after one Detroit. My mother, Bernadine A. Jackson Williams.
Why?
Because that's my mother, full stop.
I love it. I love it. With that being said, thank you so much for this great Detroit is Different.
Thank you for having me.
Peace.
Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today